All right, this video is going to be lo-fi. I'll have the green screen again next time, but I wanted to get this out as soon as possible. The mainline corporate media is praising Sebastian Kurz for allegedly uniting the Austrian Freedom Party with the Austrian Greens, and this is supposed to be a great accomplishment for which we should all be very happy. Now, you might remember Austria had an early snap election last September. Sebastian Kurz and his Austrian People's Party campaigned as conservative. They campaigned, as far as I can tell, as hardline on immigration. And his People's Party and the Conservative Freedom Party jointly got well over 50%. However, Kurz did not coalition with the Freedom Party. Instead, he picked the fourth place party, the radical left-wing Greens, and he's been in negotiation with them for a new government. Now, I knew something was seriously up the other day when the membership of the Green Party voted 93% to approve the coalition agreement. So I knew Kurz did more than just throw them a few bones. Something was seriously up. Well, I've been studying the coalition agreement for the past 24 hours, and I don't want to rehash everything, but let me put it this way. I made a video about Mette Frederiksen's coalition agreement in Denmark. She's the leader of the Social Democrats. She campaigned as being hardline on immigration. She said, I won't back down on immigration, even if it costs me the position of prime minister. Well, immediately after the election, she negotiated with the other left-wing parties and rolled back her positions to get their votes. But I don't remember anything in the Danish coalition agreement as radical as the stuff I'm seeing in this Austrian agreement. And the people who voted for Kurz and his People's Party, they have no idea what's coming. And it is so left-wing, it looks like Kurz brought Antifa right into the negotiation room and let teenage Antifa write parts of it. And I have to think that there's going to be a huge backlash. All right, let me get straight into the nitty-gritty of this. So I'm focusing on section 4, which is titled Europe, Integration, Migration, and Safety. And there's 5 parts to this. The first part is titled Austria in Europe and the World. It starts off by saying that Austria is too small to solve a lot of the biggest problems, and it must rely on the EU to implement EU-wide solutions. And number 1 on the list of things that need a EU-wide solution is immigration. Then it says visa liberalization for Kosovo, implementation of UN Agenda 2030 for sustainable growth. Then it talks about new foreign policy objectives. One of those objectives is, quote, fight against racism, which, as we all know, can mean anything. Then strengthen women's rights and support human rights activists. These are new foreign policy objectives. And then give money to a climate fund, and give money to Africa, and give money to alleged refugees around the world. All right, the next section is titled Migration and Asylum. It starts off by calling for a brand new process to bring in legal immigrants to work in Austria. Now, all the economic forecasters are calling for a shrinking job market in Northern Europe, both based on economic factors and automation. But apparently Sebastian Kurz thinks that they need all kinds of new immigrants to take jobs. Then it calls for funding for the UN Refugee Agency. It says point blank, Austria is committed to the asylum process, and Austria needs a new, more modern, and faster asylum process. And anyone that tries to get into Austria illegally, well, Austria has to respect their human rights and give them all kinds of benefits and privileges. And it pays lip service to repatriation, but it says, yeah, we can send them back, but really we need a EU-wide policy. We'll have to wait on the EU. What I get from this is, come on in. Theoretically, we can send people back, but we're going to wait on an EU-wide policy on repatriation, which is never going to come. The next section is titled Integration, and it calls for increased government funding for such vague concepts as strengthening diversity, diversity management, diversity monitoring. Then it gets really weird because it pays lip service to cracking down on radical Islam in the schools. So it says that for children under the age of 13, they won't be allowed to wear Islamic garb and they will have to conform to Western standards. But once they turn 14, they reach the age of religious maturity, and then they can wear religious garb to school and do whatever they want. I found this really bizarre. So when a student's 13, they have to act Western, and then as soon as they turn 14, they can show up to school in a burqa screaming Allahu Akbar. All right, the next part is titled Internal Security. It starts off by saying that Austria should have more law enforcement agents, but then it says that law enforcement should work directly with NGOs, and by NGOs they mean radical left-wing nonprofits. This is going on in big cities all over the United States right now with horrible effects. You have radical left-wing activists are brought right into the police station to dictate policy to the cops. Now, it calls for a national plan of action for combating, quote, right-wing extremists, a group of people who don't even exist in Austria. Now, there's thousands of left-wing extremists, many of them very violent, many of them directly tied to the Green Party. Right-wing extremists is a phantom. But it goes even further than that. It specifically singles out the identitarian movement. Now, the identitarian movement was started in France. All it is it's a movement that says we want to preserve our cultural identity in the absence of any totalitarian or authoritarian ideology. What this coalition agreement is saying is that the police have to be politicized. The police have to go after so-called right-wing extremists. And since there are no right-wing extremists, they have to go after mainline conservatives and call them extremists. It's only a small step between the identitarian movement and the youth group of the Austrian Freedom Party. I mean, they'll be going after members of the Austrian Freedom Party youth group and calling them right-wing extremists. Now, the agreement gives lip service to, quote, political Islam and says that religiously motivated crimes should be monitored, but that's a much smaller section than when it talks about going after phantom right-wing extremists. The final section is titled National Defense and Crisis and Civil Protection. It calls for modernizing the Austrian army, having an army that's all volunteers, making it attractive to join the Austrian army. But then the weird part is it says that we need to reform the fitness requirements and have two categories. A category of people who are fully compatible with military service and people who are partially compatible. I found this really weird. So who even knows what that's supposed to mean? So in other words, people who are really overweight and can't jog or anything can join the army as a partially compatible recruit. Now that was just section 4 of the coalition agreement. There's other gems in this as well, but the point I want to make is Sebastian Kurz has completely taken off the mask. Most of his voters don't know it yet, but they're going to find out very soon. He's no longer going to be able to portray himself as a strong center-right or conservative or hardliner on immigration. And really, in the past few months, we've seen Seehofer in the Bavarian Christian social movement swing way, way to the left. We've seen Michael Kretschmer in the Saxony faction of the CDU, which was one of the last remaining factions of the CDU that was still campaigning as conservative. We've seen them swing way, way to the left. That's what my very last video was about. And now we got Sebastian Kurz and the Austrian People's Party swinging way, way to the left. I have to believe that this is going to spark a huge backlash. I mean, Angela Merkel spent almost 20 years slowly pushing the core CDU bit by bit to the left. And now we've had the most conservative mainline center-right parties in the German-speaking world just plopped into the left-wing boiling pot all at once. No gradual increase in pressure, just an unbelievable sudden swing to the left. I have to think that this is going to spark a backlash. All right, thanks for watching this video. Click the like button, post a comment, tell me what you think about this. Please consider making a donation to this YouTube channel, as YouTube has mass demonetized all my videos. And please support my sponsor, Patriotic Flags, the online flag store, patriotic-flags.com. And click the subscribe button. New video every few days.